in. Let's go.
What you been up to, Michael?
I was just playing chess.
You any good?
Look, depends how emotional I am.
Okay.
Because, like, if I'm, like, focused and, you know, like, if I'm focused, I can be quite good. When I say good, like, when I do the game reviews on chess.com, it sometimes gives me as high as, like, 1850. So that's...
What's the best
good.
you can get?
Oh, like Magnus is like 2,800. And he's like the
That's
goat.
the worst. 100?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're...
Zero theoretically. But that's only when I'm playing well and focused. When I get a bit frustrated, get like a little bit emotional or angry, I'll lose to a 900. I'm shocking.
Okay.
Like it goes away very quickly.
So it's good practice for...
Amazing practice for like, hey, emotion regulation's important, and you need to learn when you've been beat
golf
on certain days
as well.
Yeah, there's probably some similarities here.
Because I know early days of golf, I snapped 2 golf clubs.
You did. Yep, I was there for them.
Yes, but now...
Still in the early days?
No. Now, I've just accepted the fact that I'm just going to hit some really bad shots. It also helps that my bad shots now are about as good as my good shots
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
So that all adds up to a much nicer experience.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Chess. Why have you gotten into chess?
I kind of get interested in it and then I get bored and then I kind of go back to it sometimes. I think it's just the challenge and the strategy of it. That's really what draws me to the game.
I've always wanted to... How do you say? It's always looked an appealing game to me. I think I would enjoy it once I got into it. However, I already have too many things going on in my life. I feel this would be just...
It can definitely be a black hole that you get drawn into for sure. And look, I fully respect people who go, I'm never going to play it.
Look, maybe one day.
Maybe.
But I've got enough... And I have enough challenge in my life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
For the minute, anyway. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I have a scenario for you.
Yeah.
And there is a wider, broader political context to it. But the scenario is this. Let's say you're minding your own business just at work.
Sure.
Right. And, you know, not necessarily a friend of yours, but someone you know comes up and sucker punches you.
Yeah. Like hard sucker punch or...
Pretty hard.
Okay.
You have blood nose.
Okay. And your intent was to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you doing after that? What do you think your visceral reaction would be?
Look, I think my initial reaction, I'd probably be a little confused. Be like, what are you doing? I might just attack them straight back. Like, that might happen. Yeah, I'd probably, might go to, tackle them and see if I can get my foot behind their foot so they just crash to the ground.
It would essentially be you were essentially reciprocating what you received.
I might reciprocate, yes.
Probably. Well, because I think that would be my initial thought process. Would be like...
It does depend a little bit. Like, am I bigger than this person?
Sure.
You know, like, their hardest punch, how hard is it really?
No, look, there are a lot of variables. But I guess I've been thinking... I'll get to the bigger overarching concept, but I just want to focus on the small because I think it helps us later on. It's the whole idea of loving you. Well, the biblical principle of loving your enemies.
Yep.
Okay. But as far as I can tell, when somebody hurts you, you technically have 3 options, but
Mm-hmm.
1, retaliate. Okay. 2, run away. 3, love them back, which is
Yep.
to love your enemies.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in the specific instance I'm thinking about, running away is just not an option.
Okay.
So you can't run away.
Mm-hmm.
So then what do you do if you get attacked, punched? I guess it doesn't have to be physical, but... And as far as I can tell, the 2 options we really have are you punch me, I punch you so hard back that you never, ever contemplate doing it again.
Yep.
Like, pummel them.
Yeah.
So you've that's not a threat anymore.
My gut is like, that's what I want to do back.
Yes.
Like, that's 100% like, if it, yeah.
And, whenever it's like whenever you see a movie and the dad or the husband or the brother see someone hurt their loved ones.
Yeah.
And they just go ham on the guy,
Yeah.
And they just want to, I'm destroying that threat.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
So that's one. And
seems to me that seems like the most natural way of
exactly
dealing with it.
Yeah. But the loving your enemies aspect of it, I've been wrestling what that actually looks like.
Yeah.
Because if there is a threat to you or family, friends, how do you love that threat but keep everybody safe? Because that's also...
Yeah.
You need to do that.
It's a very valid thing, it's that whole thing of like, sure, maybe it's simpler if the only person they're hurting is you. Then loving them back is a bit easier. But what if they're hurting someone you care about? And then if you don't do anything, is that love for the person you care about? Or, it's like, are you just willfully letting them be abused in the thought of this is love for the person doing the abusing?
Yeah. Well, okay. Look, the real world scenario I'm talking
Sure.
about is the whole Israel-Palestine conflict.
Yeah, okay.
Because I've sort of been following that again. And the whole thing is rather... Well, it's just awful, disturbing.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, they shouldn't have done this, they should have done that. And again, I'm trying to, from just a biblical principle standpoint, what should Israel do? What should the Palestinians do? And again, we won't get into the whole history of the area, but that would take 27 podcasts.
Yeah, and there'd be many people complain because we missed stuff out and
exactly
and all of that.
So but 2 years ago when October the 7th happened and the terrorist attack happened, and so what in that situation, as far as I could tell, Israel had 2 choices.
Yeah.
They couldn't run away.
No.
They're not leaving. They can't.
No.
They can't leave.
Yeah.
Option 1, retaliate with full force so that threat is completely destroyed forever.
Which might mean they completely wipe out the people.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this. Like, that's heavy.
It
But
is.
if you think about what the Allies did in World War II, we nuked Japan twice.
We did. After asking them multiple times to surrender.
Yes. But I think the whole, when you retaliate, it's how much damage do you inflict now to 50, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now have peace? Because in the case of Japan, for example, they're a pretty flourishing nation as far as...
Because one thing that did happen after World War II is that America did help both Germany and Japan, and they helped them to the point where they're now two of the strongest economies in the world. So there was certainly a retaliation, but then unlike World War I, where they retaliated and then continued to heap on the
blame, etc.
The blame and expect reparations and everything.
Economic sanctions and things.
Yeah, heaps. And it left Germany broke, crashed their economy. Whereas end of World War II, they went in and helped. So after we're stopping you from doing what you're going to do, it was much more loving approach. And I think it's shown in how both those countries have developed.
It's interesting. So, and again, when we go back to the biblical examples, in the Old Testament, God orders the Israelites to wipe out the evil from the land.
Yeah.
As in, everybody gone.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, is that sometimes necessary? Because if it is, that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Yes, very.
So you have on that end, so right now Israel are still going. They're still...
Yep.
And it looks like all of Gaza will just be
obliterated.
A rubble.
Yeah, well.
And who knows how many people will die. But in 30, 40 years' time, it's a flourishing place.
Yeah, sure. Is it worth it?
Is that justified?
Hard to say.
That's
because also depending on what camp you sit in, some people think Israel's the evil, or some people think Palestine's the evil.
Yeah, well, Hamas.
Yeah, but different sides view the whole situation differently.
Yeah, and then when I'm looking, I'm thinking, should Israel just not have retaliated at all?
But this is the tricky thing where it's like, okay, if you have your loved ones kidnapped and you do nothing, you don't retaliate.
Yeah, I know.
To me, I ask the question of, is that, how are you supposed to turn to your loved ones and say,
we did nothing?
We did nothing. Like,
we just asked.
If you don't protect, part of it's like if you don't go to protect your loved ones, how can you say they're your loved ones? So there's that too, where I'm like,
Yeah, but again, this is the quandary that I have when it comes to loving your enemies.
Yeah. To me, I see what Israel have done as a very natural response.
Yeah.
But I can't say I support it, but I just don't know where to sit.
I'm just, practically speaking, what is the best? What is the solution here? I'm not sure we are necessarily qualified, but...
There's a very hard truth where, Jesus essentially let pure evil nail him to a cross.
Yeah, I know.
And is it am I willing to let that happen? To me? Or while I see this thing of Jesus bet evil essentially by letting it overcome him. And abuse him
in a human sense.
In a human sense, he won over evil, but evil nailed him to a cross, right? So it's am I willing to let that happen to me? And I think that's very challenging and difficult. And I look at...
He also, in a way, knew that the disciples' fates would be the same.
Yeah. No, he knew awful and
Because they all died horrifically.
They did.
The disciples.
Or the only one that didn't die horrifically was boiled in hot oil. And so they all either died horrifically or were tortured horrifically, and then died later of natural causes. So it's... And he loved his disciples deeply. But he let them go through that.
Yeah. It's just, if Israel had not responded and just maybe shored up their defenses so they knew that it couldn't happen again, and then they'd... I don't know, but is this a situation where evil needs to be... I don't think...
Yeah, sure.
Is Hamas just an evil that needs to be destroyed? And the only way to do that is to go there, bulldoze the place, unfortunately. People will die. But if in 20, 30 years' time, that area of Gaza is a flourishing paradise, does that justify it?
Look, if you're going to take that stance, it puts you in a very dangerous position where you're making yourself judge
Exactly.
over others. So it's like... It's hard. And then, what if you find yourself in a position where someone's chosen to be judge over you and treat you with that same fate? Because they determine that what you're doing is inherently evil and wrong, and then they go and treat you in that same way. Yeah. I think at the moment with that Israel, Gaza, Palestine situation, I kind of take the coward's way out and just go, too hard. I don't have to look at it. I'm not going to.
Yeah. Obviously, we know what retaliation looks like, is what they're doing now. But practically, what would have loving their enemies look like? Theoretically, what would it have looked like?
Theoretically.
In your head, in your mind. Because it's all very well saying, oh, just love your enemies. Well, okay, what does it actually look like? Because they have hostages.
Yeah. And it's the leaders' kids that have been taken. So the people in the heads of Israel...
Is it just a matter of exchanging every hostage? Or using, sort of, asking the states or other countries to go, hey, can you help us out with some spec ops? And we go in there and... But then if they truly are embedded among all the buildings and all those tunnels and...
My honest answer to what loving your enemies looks like is I have no idea in that situation. I don't know.
Because turning the other cheek, couldn't that theoretically mean heaps of thousands more dead?
Could. Is that the loving thing? I don't know.
And would it just be a matter of slowly but surely ideologically beating Hamas? Like the more violence they pour into Israel, the more support, aid, care they send back. Would that eventually break down the people to be like, hang on, why do we hate these people next to us? All they're doing is helping us.
I guess that's the theory behind loving your enemies. But to me, it's such a hard theory to accept. Like I don't feel like I could ever go to Israel and legitimately ask them to do that.
No, I know.
I feel like you're just asking too much. But I'm like, would that work?
Because as far as I can tell, that's ultimately how Christianity conquered Rome.
Yes. They let themselves be torn apart in the arenas and crucified and butchered.
It took hundreds of years.
Yep.
But it did work.
It did. It's like 400 years later, you finally win the battle by just completely letting evil slaughter you. I don't know how I can ever look at somebody and ask them to do that.
But doesn't Christ ask us?
I guess he does. But I get pissed off with him for asking me to do that. Like, that annoys the crap out of me.
Yeah. Anyway, that's something I've been wrestling
Okay.
with this last week.
Yeah. Certainly a hard thing to wrestle with.
Yeah. So I guess at the moment, because Israel have retaliated, I don't see them. They're going to have to follow through.
Yep.
The only logical ending I see to this is Israel having complete control of the area.
Yeah,
Or at least for a little bit, like completely pummeling their enemies into the ground.
Yeah, okay. And that's the only way through? Or you think that's the only thing that'll happen?
I think it's the only thing that will practically happen.
Yeah, okay.
Whether it should or not.
Different question.
I mean, people, like we said, that we nuked, America, the Allies, which we were, nuked Japan. It ended the war.
It did.
I don't know how many people it kills. A lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So also the question was that the only way to, was that the nicest way to win the war?
Because America could have invaded.
It could have. Would more people have died that way?
Americans would have died.
Yep. Americans wanted to protect their own people. Yeah. And there's the really hard, theoretical thing of, they've just seen Japan go into other countries and commit genocide in other countries. You know, you look at somebody who's done that and you go, I kind of just have to beat the crap out of you. It's a very,
that's the natural.
It's the natural. Is it the best? Yeah.
All I would say is I'm glad I'm not making decisions on that.
100%.
That are that...
That's serious.
At this point in my life, anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. I know. I just hope the whole conflict ends as soon as possible, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Some people are just very black and white. Some people are very much like Israel's evil. Some people are very much like Palestine's evil. Yeah. I don't know where I sit. I'm just like, okay. Yeah. And again, specifically, I've just been trying to that whole love your enemies
and applying that to the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the biblical principle that when God did ask the Israelites or command the Israelites to wipe out evil, I guess is this that situation? Yeah, it's also it's a seemingly apparent contradiction in Christianity for a God to say, "Hey, completely wipe out a people," but also later just go, I'm just going to let the evil people kill me. And then I've been also reading when just about to finish Chronicles, and it ends with Nebuchadnezzar coming down and taking everybody away.
Yeah, and throughout Scripture it says God was using Nebuchadnezzar for that purpose.
Yeah, but then also that Nebuchadnezzar would be held account.
Yes,
which he was.
So it's God's using this person, and then he's also going to hold them account for what they've done.
I mean, Jeremiah warned them.
He did.
They got a lot of warning, Israelites, in regards to that. Yeah, maybe it is something that we will always wrestle with.
Probably. I think any situation that involves intense suffering, we're just always going to wrestle with it. Because as people, we hate the fact that suffering exists and that we have to go through it. So it doesn't matter what kind of logical answer you come to, your emotions are still going to be there going, this is awful, this is evil, I hate it. And so I think it's just always going to be that thing we wrestle with.
Do you think we're never comfortable. Do you think it's a contradiction in Scripture, though?
Look, my take is that Scripture has, is it like apparent contradictions in that it seems contradictory, but it's not.
Because Paul, Peter, Jesus, all the New Testament sort of figures all rejoice
With
when
suffering.
people persecute you
Yeah.
for the sake of the gospel in particular.
Yeah.
Jesus says it in Sermon on the Mount. Paul says it.
Yeah.
Peter says it. It's almost as if suffering...
Their whole ability to rejoice over it has always been something I've never understood, but it's also been something I've never really wanted to understand. Because I just think the path to understanding it is not a nice one.
Yeah, but I don't know. Suffering is... I can see why it causes a lot of people to stumble away from...
Yeah.
Again, it's like the parable of the sower and the seed. That life's troubles come up and they all strangle the faith of people. I'm sympathetic to that.
Yeah. I can also look at a lot of these stories and understand why somebody looks at God and says, you are evil. How can you call yourself good? That I get. I understand that point of view.
Yeah, I think that's this famous scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, is that his name?
Okay, sure. Is it?
I know he's had that. Well, look, it's a very common, the issue with evil and suffering.
Yeah.
You know.
I've wrestled with it myself, but I just,
But I sometimes I feel like they're also in a bit of contradiction. Because it's almost like they're mad at God but don't believe in him at the same time.
Yeah.
Or because they're mad at God, that's why they don't believe in him. And why are they upset then?
My take on atheism is that you're actually just mad with God, and because you're mad with him, you're trying to pretend he doesn't exist.
Right, so they're unhappy with the state of things.
Yeah.
And like, well, if it was me, I would have done it differently.
Yeah. And they go, I'm mad with you, God. I'm not having anything to do with you. I'm going to pretend you don't exist.
What about agnostic?
Agnostic, as in they believe God, but they're not sure about exactly who he is and what he looks like.
I think agnosticism is a cop-out.
Okay.
It seems to be a lot of people don't like that agnostic idea.
So, Cliff Connectley.
It's like, bro, just commit to being an atheist, you know?
No, I do think they're slightly more honest than atheists in that they at least acknowledge, okay, look, like something's made all this.
But again, so this Pastor Cliff Connectley, I forget how you say his last name, but I remember he was asked this question. He was like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you're really going to have to answer. Like, you're really going to have... That, practically speaking, you're going to go through life either believing something is true or it's not. So when it comes down to it, you will have to actually answer.
Okay. So there'll come a day where they'll have to answer.
Yeah. Sure, they can put it off.
Yeah.
But deep down, I think everybody believes one way or another what is true and what is not. I don't know how else you can exist in life.
Yeah. Though I think everybody lives with things they just choose not to have an opinion on because it's too difficult. Either emotionally or intellectually, it's too difficult, so they just go, I'm going to ignore this for as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. But back to the whole suffering aspect of it is my working theory.
Okay.
Is that my working theory is that suffering is actually a good thing.
I think it is too, although my emotions don't want me to accept it.
Yeah, and
your emotions are just being a pussy.
They are.
You need to get some concrete in you.
Harden up pills, yeah. Because, and the reason, and actually being married has cemented this. I was always sort of leaning that way.
You always have, yes.
Yes. But being married has, as far as I'm sure I can be, right now I don't see myself not having this opinion forever.
Okay.
But so, okay, just for this last week, my wife's been away. Charlotte's been away working. And that hasn't been nice.
She's looking so happily at you, just like...
That hasn't been nice. We've missed each other terribly. That is a form of suffering.
Yep.
Sure, it's mild, all things considered, but it is a form of suffering. And you think, oh, this is no good, you know, why? And that's the attitude you could have. Or you could realize the only reason that you're missing each other is because of the wonderful thing that you have to miss.
Sure.
And I don't think, in order for you to have the joy of, in this case, marriage, there has to also be the flip side of when you're not with them, it's going to just hurt a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Don't think you can have both of those. I don't think you can have one of those without the other.
Sure.
I think it's a necessary
The joy
binary.
and the suffering are two sides of the same coin.
Yes. I think in order for life to exist as it is, that's just how it is.
Okay. Yeah, look, I won't argue with it because I don't think I can argue with it.
Oh, that's disappointing.
I know. I'm sad. I've probably argued with that my whole life, and I'm like, God, I think it's stupid that God set it up so that joy and suffering are kind of interlocked in a continuous relationship. I hate it. I wish it wasn't the case, but I think when you look at life, that is the only that's the conclusion you can come to.
Yeah, and again, you could be. Like you say,
and by the way, I think God's stupid for doing it that way. I think he's an idiot. I look at him and ask the question all the time of like, God, you're technically the smartest being in the universe, and this was your best plan? Like, really? What?
But I think it's the only way.
Yeah.
I think you either have both of those or you have nothing. Just have no...
What, just like...
Just existence without any...
Which isn't that just depression?
Yeah. But if you didn't know you were depressed, would it ultimately be better? Like, would you rather not feel anything at all ever or have the highs and the lows? Going to hear, what are you choosing?
I'm picking the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
Also, mainly, I have had experiences before where I've considered something a low, but then this isn't the level of like I've lost a child, or this is a much lower level of suffering.
Yes.
But where I've suffered in some small way, as I changed my mindset around the suffering actually just disappeared, and I enjoyed that particular suffering. But it's not to somebody who's going through something terrible. I'm like,
because I think I also think that is what creates meaning.
Okay.
Without suffering, there's no meaning.
Interesting. I don't know if I'm on board with that or not. I'm just...
Okay, so let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to go golf because we play golf together.
Okay.
Again, this is really low level suffering.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason we enjoy it when we shoot under par is because we know how damn hard it is to do.
Yes.
And we've had so many rounds where we didn't. But we keep coming back. Why?
It's like one of the reflections I've often had playing video games is the video game's too easy. I get bored really quickly.
Yeah.
And I only enjoy the video games because there is a challenge to them. And if I screw up, I suffer.
Have you guys ever messed around with cheat codes?
Yes.
Yeah.
They can.
After you started playing with cheat codes, did you ever revisit the game?
I did, but I didn't. But like without the cheat codes,
Yeah.
or like so like when I reflect on my own experience, right? When I've most wanted the cheat codes is often when I'm in a really bad place and I just want an easy win. And it's like I want the easy win. I'm using the cheat code.
So
I
it's like
don't
Age
care.
of Empires, tuck.
Yeah.
Monster truck, just destroy it.
Like I'm pissed off that I'm losing, and so I'm cheating and I'm winning. But ultimately, if like I enjoy the game more when I've actually winning.
Yeah. Do you remember? We love Total War.
Yeah.
We love those games. And when we were super young, we first started playing. We didn't really know how to do it.
No.
So we would just use cheats.
Yeah.
However, then I think it was Empire Total War came out, and because it was developed in such a way that
You couldn't use cheats.
You'd have to go serious software.
Yeah.
You have to alter the whole game code, which we didn't know how to do.
No.
You couldn't just go tab 10,000 coins every.
Yeah.
can spam
yeah.
that.
Yep, we used to do that a lot.
So we actually had to learn
Yep.
how to play the game properly,
Yes.
and it just it's so much more enjoyable.
It really was. Yeah, I ended up enjoying the game in the long run a lot more
and now
because of it.
would never think to use cheats.
You know what? When I've gone back to it, I haven't even thought about using cheats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of it's because I just know how to win without them, but
But again, that's way more satisfying.
it is.
Is the overcoming of the challenge is what makes things meaningful. It's why
Yeah.
we went and saw Mission Impossible the other day.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did we like that movie, or at least aspects of it?
Yeah. Look, there's a mission you've got to overcome, and it's
Because he
difficult.
goes into the submarine. He goes down like
Yeah.
1,000 meters.
Just spoilers, by the way. Just
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's fine. Thomas comes out.
yeah, fair.
It's because there is that challenge that, and you're like, no, oh my god, whoa. And you're like, oh. But that's what.
Though I did notice there were a couple moments where I was kind of getting into it, but I was like, oh, he's gonna win. Like,
Yeah.
So it kind of took me out of it a bit. I was like, oh, but conversely, that's why I really loved Game of Thrones.
That's why I was so
Because I was
popular.
like, I actually have no clue if this person is gonna win or die,
Yeah.
and it's just like, it's an open book.
Yes.
And I ultimately prefer that Game of Thrones style than Mission Impossible. I do, personally.
But like, just imagine if right, we're watching Mission Impossible and the villain was just like, oh yeah, here you go, in the first 5 minutes, just handed him the thing he was looking for, and then the
you
entire
wouldn't-
conflict just
You
didn't
wouldn't have a
exist.
movie.
You wouldn't have a movie.
We wouldn't have had a movie. No, it would just been,
Yeah.
would have been boring. Would have been like, oh, what is this?
Yeah. Well, I forget who said it, but they said the key to making a good story is to take your character, put him up a tree, throw rocks at him, and get him back down.
Yeah.
So essentially,
Just really make him go through hell.
yeah.
And that's what makes a good story.
Yes, but make sure he. Because I think you can. One thing I didn't like so much about Game of Thrones. Well, actually, no, sort of. It was okay in the end. I think if you make it too bleak and too depressing, because I've seen movies where they just put the characters
Okay.
through hell and they all just die, and it's all just complete hopelessness.
But look, that is a side to life that people sometimes experience, where it's they go through hell, and then it doesn't seem to get better, and then it finishes, and then it's like, well,
No, it's what was the movie we watched? No Country for Old Men,
yep,
with the psychopath just gets away.
yeah. Yeah, uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable, but again, and brilliant in that sense.
Brilliant in that
but
sense.
I don't think it was completely hopeless. A story.
No,
No.
Do you think a story needs to have all the loose ends tied up by the end of the film
No.
for it to be good?
no.
I don't think it has to have all the loose ends. But I do think people can get a little bit ticked off if you leave it too open-ended. Yeah.
I don't mind being a little bit ticked off.
Well, I mean, that is so you either subvert your audience's expectations or you give them what they want.
Yeah,
So,
there does need to be a mix. Like both need to go hand in hand, I think.
yeah, so if you're going to, and again, it's all about emotional payoff, and if you're going to, all I would say is it's easier to set up an audience and give them what they want successfully. It's easier to do that countless examples.
There are.
It can work the other way, but it's like No Country for Old Men is an example. I think that worked,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always, and sometimes it just leaves people really annoyed.
They did somewhat give people a good ending in that it finished with the last scene of the guy
breaking his arm, probably,
and being in a really bad state as the movie finished.
Yeah.
So it did give the audience a little bit of like, there's a bit of justice here.
Yeah. And Tommy Lee Jones' character didn't get whacked.
While the opposite end of the spectrum was like Django, you know?
Yeah.
End of that film feels like a pimple being popped.
Yes, but again,
it's true.
I think
Very good
I don't.
point.
You have to look at not that the box office numbers are always to go by, because I mean, like Shawshank Redemption was a flop. But again,
that one's a big pimple. Gosh.
That's like,
Yeah.
but that is one of the
but
greatest
again,
movies of
how
all
is
time.
that not throwing our character up a tree? Like that's
it is.
exactly what
It is.
He just suffers.
He got thrown off a cliff.
And suffers.
Yep.
He just gets.
Just
And
hammered.
at the end, you're like,
Yeah.
he's just so happy.
Yeah. No, look, it is.
That is generally the best, in my opinion. That is the best.
Yeah, look, yeah.
That's the best
Yeah.
stories.
It's almost like in the story, the good guy has to end up winning.
Well, again, if you have this and I think in Christianity we have the underlying that belief that Christ has conquered all.
Yeah.
And so we do have like an eternal hope,
Yes.
and that's why.
And at the end of this life, we do get a happy
Yes,
ending.
and that's why personally, as someone who wants to tell stories for a living, I don't know. Personally, I feel like I have a responsibility to give people hope.
Yeah. Yeah. But even with a lot of these stories, it amazes me, like, because in the movie it only goes for what? An hour and a half, 2, 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
So the most you see is the main character suffering for 2 hours.
And a few
let's
side
say.
characters. Yeah.
And a few side characters, right? But when you think about their actual story, if you were in the movie, often they're suffering for years. That's a really hard thing to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Shawshank Redemption takes over 20 years,
Yeah.
maybe? Something.
No.
Yeah.
And if you suffer for 20 years and then get your happy ending, I'm like, that's where I'm like, that's where I agree with people in that they turn to God and say, you're evil, you're not good. And I go, it's really hard for me to disagree with you. I do, but it's really hard for me to. And
Yeah, and again, you take a look at someone like Abraham. He got Isaac, but he didn't see the fulfillment of all what he did.
No.
Moses didn't make it to the promised land,
Nope.
even after all he did. How obedient he was, and then
Yep.
one last night he strikes the rock.
Yeah. Doesn't get to go in. I don't know. I was actually thinking about this idea today, where the Lord rescues his people out of Egypt, and then he makes them walk through a desert. And at times they're really thirsty, and it would have been awful. And they're waiting around. They had periods where they're waiting around for ages. And I'm like, this people turns to God and complains? Yeah, I get it. I would too.
Yeah.
And then,
But is that just a perspective issue?
I just know I find it very easy to empathize with Israel and a lot of their responses to God. Very easy to.
Because their gripe was, back in Egypt we had food, back in Egypt we had water.
If they're doing the classic thing where back in Egypt the babies were being murdered, they were enslaved, they didn't have the freedoms. It was worse, but as we always look back on the past and we go, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Rose-colored glasses.
Yeah. So, but it's like the promised land is after you get taken out of the really bad space, walk through a desert, maybe for 40 years longer than you needed to, and then you finally get there.
Well, some of them didn't, though.
So, exactly.
There's a whole generation
Some of them
to
didn't.
perish.
And if that's your life experience and you turn to God and say, I don't think you're good, I get it.
Yeah.
And then if you have that experience and you want to reject God, I'm like, I see where you're coming from.
Do you think ultimately it's a pride issue?
My gut is yes. Because I often look at God and I go, God, this is how you do things? I could do a way better job.
Because to stick with this whole sort of story analogy, I think mostly I feel like Frodo, as in I'm the main character.
Sure.
I'm the chosen one. I have the ring. I'm going to go and drop it in, and I'm not going to...
Maybe big boy.
And I'm not going to stumble. I don't need a Samwise, you know? But really, am I just that kid in Helm's Deep who Aragorn gives a sword and tells him to just be brave?
Oh, yeah.
Am I...
And all I want to be is the hobbit that was still in the Shire and never had to go and do any of that.
Smoking on his pipe, drinking his beer, and then when they come back, they're like, look at these weirdos.
Exactly, yeah. That's where I want to be.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, I don't know, either way, I think it's pride in a different, just portrayed differently.
Look, because I find myself very much looking at God often and going, God, this is the way you've decided to do it. That's so stupid. You could do it any other way, and you've picked this way.
But who are we to know?
But ultimately, that's me going, I'm smarter than you, God. I know better than you.
Yeah.
You should do it my way because my way's better. And that is arrogance because, yeah.
What do we know?
Exactly.
You know nothing.
Exactly. You know nothing. It's like the story of God talking to Job and going like,
where were you?
Exactly. Like
when I was doing this.
Yeah.
Job has no response. He's just like...
No response, yeah.
Ooh. Though Job did a pretty good job, all things considered.
Yeah. Better job than I would have done.
Yeah, but he was a bit older, a bit wiser.
Maybe, yeah, he was.
Is that all we should aspire to as human beings?
Be like Job.
Be like Job.
I hope I don't have to be.
Well, no, look, Christ is the ultimate example.
Yep.
But, I guess that's the whole point of the Old Testament is all these figures.
And even the story of Job, I look at that and I can see someone, because Job, it says, was a righteous man. So he had no reason to suffer the way he did. And Satan comes up to him and he's like, hey.
God saw fit to let it happen.
He saw fit to let it happen, which to me makes him responsible.
Sure. I can see how you'd think that.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, if he's not fully responsible, he's at least partially responsible. And then I look at people who are very angry with God for that, and I go, makes sense. I am too.
Okay, what should they do with that?
The only thing I can think of is Romans 9, where it's like, you are but a lump of clay in the potter's hands. You just kind of have to accept it. Like, it's really hard. But, like, look to the hope of the future. Like, we have... I look at it as we have 80 years of the worst experience we're ever going to have on this earth. Most of the time is not that bad. It is terrible at times, but...
For us, anyway.
It's terrible for us at times, and sometimes, you wish you weren't alive. But for the most part, it is pretty good. Or at least, for me, it's been pretty good. For the most part.
Yeah, I suppose as Christians we have an eternal mindset, though.
Yeah, I think that's the only way you get through it. The eternal mindset of, okay, when I die and ultimately am with God in heaven, I'm not going to remember. Or if I do, I'm not going to think about it that much, and it's not going to be that bad.
The idea of death actually being a mercy.
It is a mercy. I think Scripture's clear that death is a mercy.
Yeah, because I don't think many people...
view it that way.
Because I recently watched... Oh, my goodness. I think it was some prominent atheist put forth, the idea of unnecessary suffering to sort of animals or creatures that can't reason. You know, and he gives the example of like a deer gets its foot caught in a tree,
Sure.
and it just freezes, ultimately dies of hunger,
Yeah.
and then dies. It's like, why? What the heck's going on there? And again, because that deer appears to have no. Like if we suffer, we can say, "Oh, it's because it's for a higher purpose. It teaches us, it challenges us, it grows us." Or is this deer is just going to die?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, at least he dies.
Yeah. Like that's the mercy.
The mercy
He
is
got
that
to
it
die.
dies, and that unfortunately, for that deer, and again, it just comes. I just don't. The fact that the world exists as it does. It's just an unfortunately necessary byproduct of the way the world is set up. But that death is ultimately a mercy,
Yep.
not an nihilistic end.
No. Yeah. I think probably a good chunk of the world does have a very nihilistic view of death. I think it makes it very hard for you to understand suffering.
Yeah. Well, if this is as good as it gets, then...
Whereas I actually have the opposite, where this is as bad as it gets.
Yes. That's a very different perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
Very different perspective. Yeah. If you look at this world and go, this is as good as it gets, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, I think you should be. Congratulations, you're thinking about the world correctly. If you're like, if you think, yep.
And that's a good distinction to make. Because I think a lot of people overlook that eternal perspective that Christianity has, and ultimately the Bible. Well, from Genesis to the Revelation is all about the long game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look at somebody like Paul, and he wanted to die.
To live as Christ, to die as gain.
And you look at how he acted a number of times through Scripture. If anybody thinks he didn't want to die, please come have a chat to me, because I'll convince you otherwise.
Well, because he had multiple ways out.
Paul was continuously told, hey, if you go back to Jerusalem, this is what's going to happen to you, and you'll end up dying.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm marching straight there. He knew what he was getting himself into fully, and he was like, yep.
He didn't need to appeal to Caesar either, I don't think.
He didn't have to, although it was slightly beneficial. He was.
I remember. I'm pretty sure it was like Agrippa or somebody who saw him and was like, "Well, this guy, I don't see why this guy needs to die. He's just a preacher man." But he's like, "Oh, he appealed to Caesar, so he's got to go." But yeah, he had multiple.
He had multiple times where he could have tapped out of his fate, and he was like, "Nope."
And nobody would have thought less of him either.
They were literally asking him not to. They were like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Don't go. And he's like, no, I'm going.
Yeah. Well, he called himself essentially a slave for Christ, didn't he?
He was. And he appealed to the mindset of, like, if you're free, make yourself a slave for Christ.
I mean, slavery is also another issue people take. Another... thing that people take issue with Christianity.
Yes.
Just yes.
Yep. There you do. Good.
I want to offer a perspective on that.
Good analysis, Will. Yes, people do hate Christianity for that.
I've been going for almost an hour now, and Mike was just like, "Yeah, I'm tapping out."
I'm honestly just like thinking about the question.
Well, this would be if somebody asked you, "Does the Bible condone slavery?" What would you say? You can tap out. I've thought a lot about this question.
No, I've got thoughts about it. It's hard to articulate.
Just fumble your way through.
Better question, Michael. Are you pro-slavery? Do you want a slave?
Pro-slavery.
I actually am pro-slavery.
Yeah.
Whoa!
I can explain.
Hot take.
Okay.
Okay.
Scripture tells us that we can either be slaves to death and sin or slaves to Christ.
So it's a bit of a subversive answer.
I think all human beings are slaves to something.
Yep.
It's just it's not if slavery is wrong, it's slavery exists. Who are you a slave to? That is the question to ask.
Okay. So you think we're all just slaves and we just got to pick who our master is?
Mm-hmm.
So it's slavery is a fact of life.
Yes.
Don't worry, Michael. You can be my slave if you want.
Really?
Yeah, I'll look after you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Liam. Although I do think currently it's a little bit the other way around. But yeah, sure.
No, I'm a slave to cash converters, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're my masters.
Well, there's a whole biblical principle about employers being essentially masters, but that's a whole other topic.
Well, look,
I think human beings were ultimately made to worship and love God.
yes.
Is that not slavery if you phrase it differently?
For the people who say worshipping God is a form of slavery, I can see where they're coming from. Yeah.
Because the reality is, the fact, our pecking order in the universe, if you will, aligns itself. We have to be slaves to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep. Yes.
More insightful commentary from Michael.
Yep. All I've got to say right now is yes. I think a lot of people will disagree with you, but I don't think they can be argued into your perspective. I think some people listening will go like, I disagree, and all I can do is go, cool, disagree. That's fine.
Because, all right, think about it. In a way, we are sort of slaves to our employers.
Yep, we are. Especially when you look at language and terminology has changed a little bit in that it was kind of like if you were a business owner back in the day, you're the master. And
Yes, but even a business owner has the master.
yeah. Explain that a bit more.
Okay. If you own a business, right, you have to pay tax.
Yeah. You've also, a good business, it kind of makes the customers their master. Because they look at the customer and they go, how can I serve this person so that they'll give me money so that I can survive? So in one sense, the business owner is a slave of the customer. And if
See, I thought you were going to say a good business owner doesn't pay tax. That's where you were going with that.
Well, that too, Liam.
I would probably suggest most successful business owners don't pay tax. Yes.
Exactly. Cash only, please.
Cash only, please. Yep.
Well, no, they're just very clever accountants.
Yeah,
Well,
you set up an offshore company that you rent rights from in a tax-free haven.
yeah.
Speaking from experience,
That's how you do it, yeah.
Look, Charlotte's looking at me shocked.
Hey, she works at a bank. She knows all about it.
She
Yeah.
does. Charlotte, how many people have you helped do this?
Tax evasion 101.
So Charlotte is a bad banker, guys. If you want to be a successful business owner, don't go to Charlotte.
forget Better Call Saul.
But she's
Better
far
Call
too
Charlotte.
honest.
But
She's far too honest to be
also,
a good banker.
In all seriousness, it's like when it comes to authorities, God tells us to submit to them because He's ordained that
Yes.
they be there. And so it's just a matter of who is the ultimate master. Is it your feelings? Is it the brain between your legs? Is it your
I've been there
thirst?
before. My 11th finger, man. It has a lot to say.
So, Liam, your
was gonna
11th
go-
finger, not your third leg? Are you saying something about it?
No. It's horses have the
Third leg, the fifth leg.
the fifth leg.
Oh, yeah.
because it's actually
Okay,
like
speak for yourself.
mega.
Okay.
Anyway, that's a lovely image. Thank you, Liam.
You're welcome.
But yeah, like who is the? For some people, it is the brain between their legs. For some people, it's greed. For some people, it's
Yep.
there will always be something that you worship. Idols, slavery. I think it's all ultimately the same thing. Now, you could have a debate about specific eras, periods of time, and how slavery was practiced. Is that in keeping? Because the people immediately think of the...
Geez, some autistic people have some really weird gods.
Really?
Just think about it. This guy is like, one thing is like, oh my gosh, trains, man. Not any kind of train, like, you know, like this locomotive, and it's like the steam thing, and it's like this particular
Yep.
model. That's their god. They're like, oh my gosh, man.
Or,
The,
yeah.
Okay, the pushback to this argument would be most people get to chop and change their God as they see fit, which I think they would say that ultimately makes them God, or them their own God. Because, yes, one day I might be slave to my boss, and the next day I might be slave to the brain between my legs. The next day I might be slave to greed, but I get to pick which one I serve.
So
Therefore, because I get to choose, I am God, essentially.
yeah. Okay, I just see that as them having to switch masters. Or is the whole point because they get to switch masters?
Yes.
That makes me ultimately God.
Yes, because I get to switch masters.
Okay, or is people who were stuck with a master back in the day couldn't?
Because I feel like your viewpoint, which I might hold as well, it ultimately leads... There's a way to look at God in the same way. It's like, are we ultimately God's master? Because he spends his time serving us in a sense.
By giving us
No,
the world? How does God... Or he came down and...
he came down, died for us.
That was an aspect of Jesus, wasn't it?
Yeah, but Jesus is God.
He came down and he washed
Yeah.
our feet.
Yeah, he washed their feet. Like, in some ways, you know, like with this same like reasoning, I would see it going as far as, okay, God is also kind of our slave.
Sure, I would say to someone who wants to, like, good luck with that. Living
Okay.
that out,
Okay, yeah.
I guess.
I love how heretical we just got.
Yeah.
It's great. Like, really just living the podcast name,
Yep.
living it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, good luck with that.
I think also most people only want to have a relationship with God if he does kind of end up as our slave.
They treat him as a genie.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like in Aladdin, the genie is... Whoever has the bottle is like the master of...
Yes.
And so, yeah, I can see what
And-
people think.
and-
Absolutely, yeah.
And we only want to be with God if he is like the genie for us. And the minute he's not, we go, oh, he's not good. He's evil. Like, oh, he's not giving me my every wish and command. How dare he?
Yeah. But again, I think, like you were saying, I'm not sure you could argue somebody out of that. I think you just have to go, okay, go and live life like that and see how that works out for you.
Yep.
And let me know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, yes, I think the Bible does condone slavery, but I think it's layered and nuanced.
The question I'd want to throw back at that person is, when you ask, does the Bible condone slavery? Like, is there a specific way that people are treated, or is there a certain kind of slavery that you're referring to? Because according to the Bible, certain type of slavery is allowed, but it also sets out a lot of rules and regulations for what that looks like. And it basically said, if you're a citizen of Israel, in modern language, you actually can't be an eternal. You can only choose to go into slavery, and it's more close to I'm choosing to be employed by someone, and that person will take care of me and everything, and I'll work for them. And
again, that happens today. Some people do a job because they need it.
Yes.
Plenty of places.
Yeah. And there is like, it's almost like there's a fixed contract. So the people who are like, the Bible is pro-slavery, there's a certain type of slavery it's not pro of. But there is a certain type of slavery that I think when you break it down looks more like employment that the Bible is pro. The condition would be like, some of these conditions aren't applied to those who are not of...
Yeah, we had enemies of war.
Yeah.
And... Yeah. No, I'm sympathetic.
Yeah.
To that. But I think if you really sit down and go through it all, I just think there's a consistency that we're all slaves ultimately to somebody and something. And that is the point of life is not... The point of life is it how you suffer? I don't know, maybe that's too broad a statement.
I think so. I also don't know if you asked me what the point of life is, I wouldn't go there.
But life on earth. Sure, we have this eternal mindset that this is the worst that it gets.
Yep.
Which implies that there's something wrong with it.
Yes.
You know? As in, there's suffering.
Yeah.
Or is somebody without that mindset will look at...
I think if you don't have an eternal mindset,
Yeah.
None of faith makes sense.
You think that's just the key to reading Scripture?
I think it's the key to reading Scripture and understanding God better. And I think often people go into arguments with atheists and non-Christians, and I think the first thing you have to acknowledge is, hey, I'm approaching all of my thinking through the lens of an eternal mindset. And I know you're probably not. So we're going to disagree on a lot of stuff because the foundation of where we're approaching this is very different.
Yeah.
So let's first acknowledge that and then see if we can still have a conversation. Or if we can't, we just disagree and part ways. I'll listen to you, listen to me, and we just agree to disagree.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the best that can be done sometimes.
Yeah.
Be that eternal mindset. Yeah, I think that's probably a good point. Yeah.
It's the only way I've come to grips with a lot of the suffering that I've either had happened to me or I've encountered.
Particularly the
in
unjust.
other people. Yes, particularly the unjust stuff. It's like, how do I come to grips with that?
Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. Even just like, yeah. Because it's a reality of life. I also think the standard Christian way of going, yeah, but nobody's good. I just don't think that... I kind of agree with it, but I just don't think it's helpful. I'm like, yeah, nobody's good, but sometimes people go through things that they didn't deserve.
There's in-proportionate
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
Like Job.
Like Job. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Bible really is not... You can't put... you can't reconcile the idea of karma with Scripture, can you?
The closest thing you'd say is like you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's like, and there is, but even that, it's like, in Scripture, like, justice was like, you deserved worse, and God's taken that on the cross. So thank God you don't get karma. You know, that's more of a Christian mindset of like, thank God karma doesn't apply to us. Because if it did, it'd be worse for you.
None of us would get out of here alive.
Exactly.
So to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or there would be just.
Or the only way it does kind of play in is like if you've experienced something you didn't deserve, then it's God will ultimately make things right, either in this life or the next.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how satisfying people would find that.
I don't think it's very satisfying at all. I just think it's one of those things in life you have to grieve. I think there's certain truths.
Yeah, I know some
you just
people
have to grieve it.
really struggle with the idea of injustice.
Yeah.
It's like, for me personally, it's not that big an issue. Maybe that's just I've not experienced it properly. That could be it.
I do think to a large extent we haven't gone through some of the injustices that others have, so it just doesn't trigger us as much.
Yeah, but I still think it's still the same perspective you have to have, though.
Yeah, but it's much harder when you. It's very easy to like theorize and go like, yeah, this is the right perspective to have. But the minute you're in the situation, then it's very difficult to hold or agree with it, or just be okay with what's happening. So I think it's,
do you have to be okay with it? So I think Job was angry, wasn't he?
Probably, yeah.
Didn't he? You know, he.
Yeah. He definitely.
Like, I wish I'd never been born.
Yeah.
You know. But he doesn't take the approach that his wife has, who just tells him to curse God
and die. I'm much more typical.
What's a pot of words from a spouse?
I'm much quicker to take the perspective of the wife, though, so I definitely get what she's saying.
Just curse
God and
die. But she doesn't die, does she? The wife?
Nah, she goes on to have.
They go on to get restored twice, or
Well, if you take the biblical idea of like you can't hurt him, if they're one flesh, Satan couldn't take the wife.
Interesting. So she was covered by him.
Yeah.
At least that's also biblical. That's a biblical principle.
That's how I'm looking at it. Anyways, to why she couldn't be. Is why he could lose everything but her because she's the one flesh.
Yes. Also, it was when you read God, like his friends.
They were really good for a long time. They lasted like a few days. Or weeks.
I think they spent a week with him.
Just. I struggle to do 30 minutes.
Each of them tore their robe and threw dust over there. They sat down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, with no one speaking a word. They just saw that his pain was very great.
Yeah.
Why did I not die at birth? I don't know. I actually see a book like Job and Christ and almost all the stories as it's like if somebody asks why would God create a world in which there's suffering, I would always say why the heck would he create a world in which there's suffering and then choose to suffer worse than anybody else?
That's what I can't get my head around. That's something I don't understand. I look at God and go, I think you're an idiot for doing it that way. I needed you to. But then I'm also like, why didn't you just make the world where I didn't need you to?
Because then there'd be no meaning.
I just think the meaning would be different.
Then it wouldn't be meaning, it'd be something else.
So? We wouldn't know any different. Like, but then ultimately that's me saying I'm smarter than God and I know better than you and you should do it my way. Which I can ultimately understand I'm not smarter than God and I don't know better than him. But I definitely have moments where I think I do.
Have you ever lived out life like that and it worked out?
What, where I think I know better than God? I honestly just view myself as someone far too desperately in need of him. To really just...
Oh, no, I just can't think of a time where I had that perspective and it ended well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
pride comes before the fall.
Yeah. Look.
Is that as true a statement as there is?
Yeah. If you live out that I know better than God, I'm going to do it my way because, yeah, it'll ultimately be worse. I have a lot of empathy for those who do view life that way.
Yeah.
I understand how they come to that conclusion.
I'm just not sure it leads to life.
I don't think it does. I think it leads to death. I think it's ultimately a bad mindset. But I think some people have to go through a season of it in order to accept the harsh reality.
Yeah. Okay, perhaps we should end on a more
Positive note.
light-hearted, positive note.
We could play one final round of that game we played last week.
What was the game?
The game where I poorly describe Bible characters and you guess.
Oh, yeah, fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Who it
I don't
was.
remember being very good at that game. But,
Yeah. Maybe have a bit more patience with us as well. Like, let us have a few more guesses at who we think it is.
I know one of them we got wrong like 5 times.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you did, didn't you?
I think it was Isaiah.
Yeah, actually, it was like it sounded like Isaiah, but it was actually someone else.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, there you go. I didn't even...
I don't
All right,
know. I don't know.
Let's go
I
with
have
an
no
easy one to
memory.
start off with. A left-handed guy who stabbed a king
Ehud.
so deep. Let me finish reading it, Michael.
He's my favorite character. I know him like
As soon
instantly.
as you said left-handed...
I was like, done.
All right, here we go. So again, left-handed guy who stabbed a king so deep into the fat swallowed the sword. Who is it?
Ehud.
No idea.
There we go. One for Michael. Lady offered a nap and some milk, and then hammered a tent peg through a guy's head.
Was it Jez? No.
Keep going. See if you can get it.
I know. I'm thinking.
You got it,
I know
Michael?
this
I love this
story.
girl. Yeah.
I know. I can. And it's the guy. It's in Judges.
It is in
isn't it?
Judges.
We did a whole video on
Yeah.
this at some point. I
Judges
forget it.
number 4.
Do you remember the name?
I forget her name.
JL.
JL. Yeah, it's
That's the one.
Tent Peg and JL.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Another great story.
Yeah. That's.
It's brutal.
All right. A prophet who built a tiny model city, laid on his side for 390 days, and cooked food over shit.
Do you? Yeah.
Is it Elijah?
Nah. Close. Like
Elisha.
No. I say close. It wasn't that close.
No.
Built a model.
Yeah. It's more the laying on his side and cooked food over shit. It was originally going to be human feces, and then he pleaded with God, and God was like, no, it can be like cow feces or some other feces, horse feces. Or
No, I don't know.
Ezekiel. He actually, you can actually cook what's called Ezekiel bread. And Ezekiel bread has all of the basic vitamins a human needs to survive.
But
And you cook it over.
do they
dung.
cook it over dung, or do they?
You can cook it in an oven.
Okay.
But you could cook it over shit if you wanted to.
I'd
Is
rather
that
not.
where Tolkien get his idea? of
Woman
the
turned into a
farmer's
pillar of
bread?
salt mid-evacuation because she looked behind her.
Lot's wife.
Yeah.
Lot's
I
wife.
forget
There we
her
go.
name. Do we even know her name?
She doesn't have a name.
It's just Lot's
Lot's
wife.
wife.
A donkey saw an angel, stopped
Yep.
in its tracks, and then verbally roasted its rider.
Yep.
Wasn't that Balaam or?
Yeah. Balaam's donkey.
Yep. Balaam's donkey, that's the one. Here's a really hard one for you. Random guy showed up at Jesus' arrest, ran away naked
Isn't that Mark?
when things got spicy.
Yeah. I can't tell you his name, but it's.
I thought
He's referred to as the naked dude in Mark.
the naked dude. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually thought. I read someone who actually thought that was literally Mark.
Oh, okay.
Dude had
Maybe.
24 fingers and toes, got taken out by a kid with a sword.
Goliath. No. 24.
Kid with a sword.
Kid with a sword. No, it's probably Goliath or Goliath's brothers. Did they have? I think they.
Do you want a clue?
Kid with a sword.
It's in the book of Samuel.
How is it not Goliath?
Yes, that just seems like Goliath.
Or is it?
Yeah, it's David kills Goliath
It's
and his brothers.
The character is the six-fingered giant.
Yeah. Okay. It's like a descendant from the Nephilim type deal. Okay.
Okay.
Kid made fun of a bald guy, so he called
yeah.
the bears on them.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Elijah?
Elisha.
Elisha, yeah.
Elisha, yes.
Yes, Elisha.
Uh,
That's a Bruce. Oh my goodness.
It is.
dude got crushed by
It
a woman
is.
dropping a milestone from a tower.
Oh, Millstone.
Millstone.
It's one of the.
Here's a hard one.
Oh, I know the story. He's a king.
Wait, can you say it again?
So a dude got crushed by a woman dropping a millstone from a tower.
Was this Jezebel's husband?
It could be.
No, he's a king.
This is a very difficult one.
This is in,
Yeah, but it was the king of It was one of the kings of Israel, wasn't it? That was married to Jezebel. I thought that's what it was.
Isn't that Ahab?
It's from the book of Judges.
It's
Is it
Judges.
Ahab?
Judges 9.
Oh, Judges.
No.
I've got that wrong then. I've
He's
got that
like
wrong.
a commander or king of somebody, and he gets the. I don't know his name.
Yeah, okay, it's a hard one. It's
Hang on.
Do you want it?
Judges 9.
Abby
Abishak?
Abimelech. Abimelech.
Abimelech?
Amalek. Amalek.
Okay.
Abimelech.
Okay.
Abimelech. Yeah, cool.
Abimelech.
I wasn't going to get that one. Yep.
Yeah, that's a difficult one.
Yep.
A man killed by his own long, fabulous hair getting stuck at a tree.
Isn't that Absalom?
Yes, bang on. That's a good one. That's a really good one.
That's
Because then
hilarious.
Joab kills him.
A guy who built a gold statue and demanded everyone dance or die.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the one.
Yep.
That's a
Dude
really-
was so scared of battle, he tested God with a wet fleece twice.
Gideon.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep.
Guy who tried to catch the Ark of the Covenant died instantly.
Oh, I don't know his name.
I forget his name too.
Another hard one.
Didn't David get upset about that?
He might have. It's from 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
It is. I know the story.
I forget his name.
Yeah, I've seen.
Uzzah.
User.
That's the one. Man dropped dead for lying about money.
Oh, and yep. But it's more than just a man. It's the man and wife, I think.
It's from Acts.
Yeah, from Acts. I forget their names.
Yes, they are supposed to. They were supposed to
What?
give it to the congregation.
They
weren't
did no, because I think it was they said they would,
they
and
didn't.
and because they said they would, and they said they did, God was pissed. They didn't have to. They just said they would, and they said they
Right.
did. So there was.
I don't know his name. Their names.
Ananias.
Ananias. Yeah, okay.
Prophet fed by ravens and
Yep.
chilled by a brook for days.
Elijah, I think.
Yes.
That's Elijah. okay.
Elijah. Guy who picked up a donkey's jawbone and used it as a weapon.
Yeah.
Isn't that Samson?
Yes.
Yeah. Samson.
Random young prophet got eaten by a lion after ignoring instructions.
Oh, I know this story. I forget his name, but
You actually got it correct. He's listed as the unnamed prophet.
hey, look at that.
That's the other one, right?
Because I'm pretty sure the story goes there was like a woman in the town who kept hounding him to like stay the night or something and just stay in the town like stay on living, and he just kept refusing and eventually he gave in. Then he got eaten.
Dude who made 2,000 pigs commit a group suicide.
Jesus.
Is it? Yeah.
Kinda. It's listed as Legion.
Oh,
That was the
the
name of the
demon he
demon.
cast out.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was the demon's
Yeah.
choice, wasn't it?
Oh, here's an easy one. Ran away from God, got swallowed up by the
Yeah.
sea monster, still grumpy after.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, anyway, moving on. Built a boat so big animals showed up uninvited.
Yeah.
I wonder who that one could be.
No idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Who knows? No idea.
You've got no idea. Wow.
Love
Wow. A guy in charge of watching coats during a murder later writes half the New Testament.
Paul.
Again, yes.
Yeah.
It's listed as Paul again. Woman who flirted with a dude to find his secret and sold him out.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Delilah.
Delilah. All right, let's get one last one. Guy who tried to buy the Holy Spirit like it was a software upgrade.
Yeah. I love that.
I don't know his name, but I know the story and acts. He's
Yeah.
like, yo, Peter, can I hook me up, bro?
I think is it. Yeah,
He's a magician or something, isn't he?
he is.
Yes.
He is.
Charlatan type.
Very close.
Oh, is it like Simon?
Yes.
Simon the magician.
Simon
Simon.
the sorcerer.
Yeah,
Simon.
yeah. Simon
That
the
was a
Sorcerer.
that was a good one.
Yeah.
That's cool. Alrighty, that was a good discussion.
It was.
Until next time,
Till next time.
catch ya.
Thank you for watching.